Introduction to the Birds of the Air. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Birds of the Air by John Frost. Introduction. In a little book which I put forth not long ago, called Visit to the Menagerie, I have given an account of the most interesting of the quadrupeds. Some of my little friends who have read that book desire that it should be accompanied by another, in which the birds of the air are described and figured, and it is in compliance with their wishes that I now commence this little book of birds. I will give in it an account of all the most remarkable birds, with well-drawn pictures showing their form, and I will tell such stories and anecdotes about them as may occur to me as I go on. According to the Linnaean system, which, however, I shall not rigidly follow in my arrangement, the land birds are divided into 4 classes: the rapacious birds, acapitres, the pies, picae, the passerine birds, passeres, and the gallinaceous birds, gallinae. The water birds consist of 2 classes, the waders, grauli, and the swimmers, anseres. Of the rapacious birds, the bills are hooked and there is an angular projection on the upper mandible. Of the pies, they are sharp-edged, compressed on the sides, and convex on the upper surface. Of the passerine birds, conical and sharp-pointed. Of the gallinaceous birds, the upper mandible is considerably arched. The waders have a roundish bill and a fleshy tongue. And of the swimmers, the bills are broad at the top and covered with a membranaceous skin. End of introduction. Read by Elsie Selwyn. Section 1 of The Birds of the Air by John Frost. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Ostrich, Cassowary, Dodo, Condor, and Vulture. The Ostrich. As in some measure connecting the class of quadrupeds with that of the feathered race, the ostrich is, perhaps, the bird which is entitled to claim our attention first. In external appearance it bears some resemblance to the camel. Its internal conformation allies it to quadrupeds. It grazes with animals, and its plumage gives the idea rather of hair than of feathers. The ostrich is generally 7, sometimes 9, feet high from the top of the head to the ground, but from the back it is only 4, so that the head and neck are above 3 feet long. From the top of the head to the rump, when the neck is stretched out in a right line, the length is 6 feet, and that of the tail about a foot more. One of the wings, when stretched out, is about 3 feet, and at the end of each wing there is a kind of spur, almost like the quill of the porcupine. The plumage is generally black and white. The upper part of the head and neck are covered with fine white hair, and in some places there are small tufts of it, which grow from a single shaft about the thickness of a pin. The neck of this animal, which is of a livid flesh color, seems to be more slender in proportion than that of other birds, from its not being furnished with feathers. The head and bill somewhat resemble those of a duck, and the external form of the eye is like that of a man's, the upper eyelids being adorned with lashes which are longer than those on the lid below. The thighs are large, fleshy, and wrinkled in the manner of a net. The legs are covered before with large scales. The foot is cloven and has 2 toes of unequal sizes. These animals seem formed to live among the sandy and arid deserts of the torrid zone, and in those regions they are seen in large flocks, which, to the distant spectator, appear like a regiment of cavalry, and have often alarmed a whole caravan. There is no spot, however sterile, but what is capable of supplying them with provision, as they are of all creatures the most voracious, and possess surprising powers of digestion. Hence they will devour leather, hair, stones, or anything that is given to them, and those substances which the coats of the stomach cannot soften are excluded in the form in which they were swallowed. In southern Africa they are exceedingly injurious to the farmers, as they will destroy a field of wheat so effectually as not to leave a single ear behind. The Cassowary. The cassowary of New South Wales is thus described by Latham. It is blackish, the crown flat, its body bristly, its head and neck planted with quills, and its legs serrated behind. The head and beak are much more like those of the ostrich. The tongue has a broad root, serrated sides, and pointed top. This bird is exceedingly swift of foot, and strikes severely with its heel when pursued. It frequently measures nearly 7 feet when standing erect. Its flesh is said to be similar in flavor to beef. The hen lays a number of eggs, which are rather less than those of the ostrich. They are nearly of an oval shape and of a bottle green color. The principal material of the nest is dried fern. It is usually constructed on the ground, on the borders of a swamp. The dodo. The wings of the dodo are somewhat similar to those of the ostrich and cassowary, but in its general appearance it differs from these and indeed all other known birds. We are perhaps incorrect in speaking of the dodo in the present tense, for in all probability it is now extinct. There is not even a perfect specimen to be found. Still, no doubts are entertained of its having once been in existence. The only authentic original figure of the dodo is a painting in the British Museum, which is said to have been taken from the living bird, brought into Holland by the Dutch, soon after the discovery of the East Indies, by the way of the Cape of Good Hope. Beneath the painting is a dodo's leg, in a fine state of preservation, which is very thick in proportion to its length, and satisfies the eye of every ornithologist that it cannot belong to any other known bird. The dodo must have been as incapable of running with any degree of speed as flying. It may be pronounced the most inelegant, awkward, and clumsy-looking creature of the whole feathered tribes. In size it exceeds the turkey. The neck is thick and pursy, the body heavy, lumpish, and nearly cubical, the tail disproportioned and not in the usual place. The plumage is represented as being a variegation of black and white, with a slight mixture of yellow. The immense mandibles open far back in the head, behind the eyes. The upper one is black except at the hook, where there is a red spot. The legs and feet are yellow, and the nails black. The toes are 4 in number, and one of them points backward. The dodo was formerly found in the Isle of France, but for the last 2 centuries not a single individual of the race has been met with. The Dutch called it walvogel, or the disgusting bird, as well on account of its ugly figure as its offensive smell. The flesh, however, is said to have been palatable and wholesome food. The condor. The condor is an inhabitant of South America. It belongs to the vulture tribe and in size considerably exceeds the largest eagle. The wings, when expanded, have sometimes been found to extend to 18 feet, but from 10 to 13 feet seems to be the usual measure. The great wing feathers, which are of a shining black, are 2 feet 4 inches long. The strength and size of its body, bill, and talons are in proportion, and its courage equals its muscular powers. The throat is naked and of a red hue. A short down of a brown color clothes the head, and its eyes are surrounded with a circle of reddish-brown. The plumage on the breast, neck, and wings is of a light brown, that on the back rather darker and sometimes of a jet black. The legs, which are strong and large, are covered with black scales, and the toes are armed with claws of the same color. The vulture. Of this class of birds, the principal are the golden or carrion vulture, the aquiline or Egyptian vulture, the Cape vulture, and the Brazilian vulture. In one point they all have a perfect resemblance. They are filthy, indolent, and rapacious, and the smell of them is offensive. The golden vulture, which, if we accept the condor, seems to be at the head of the tribe, is about 4 feet and a half long, from the end of the beak to that of the tail, and generally weighs about 4 or 5 pounds. The head and neck are only covered with a few scattered hairs, and the latter is covered with a red skin, which at a distance gives to the creature the look of a turkey, and the eyes are more prominent than those of the eagle. The whole plumage is dusky, mixed with purple and green. The legs are of a dirty flesh color, and the claws are black. The male aquiline vulture is entirely white except the quill feathers, which are black edged with hoary, but the female is brown with the same exception of the quill feathers. The Cape vulture bears a great similarity to the last species, but its head is of a bright blue color, covered with a yellowish down, and its plumage is somewhat of a coffee color. The vulture is common in many parts of Europe, and in Egypt, Arabia, and many other kingdoms of Africa and Asia he is found in great abundance. In Egypt, and particularly in Grand Cairo, there are great flocks of them, which render a most important service to the inhabitants by devouring all the filth and carrion which might otherwise render the air pestilential. The ancient Egyptians were so sensible of the utility of this bird that they made it a capital crime to put one of them to death. End of Section 1. Read by Elsie Selwyn. Section 2 of The Birds of the Air by John Frost. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The golden eagle, osprey, secretary falcon, kite, and moor-buzzard. The golden eagle. Among birds, the eagle is usually considered to hold the same place that the lion does among beasts. Buffon has drawn between them a parallel which displays his usual eloquence. Quote, magnanimity, end quote, says he, quote, is equally conspicuous in both. They despise the small animals and disregard their insults. It is only after a series of provocations, after being teased with the noisy or harsh notes of the raven or magpie, that the eagle determines to punish their temerity or their insolence with death. Besides, both disdain the possession of that property which is not the fruit of their own industry, rejecting with contempt the prey which is not procured by their own exertions. Both are remarkable for their temperance. This species seldom devours the whole of his game, but like the lion leaves the fragments and offals to other animals. Though famished for want of prey, he disdains to feed upon carrion. Like the lion also, he is solitary, the inhabitant of a desert, over which he reigns supreme, excluding all the other birds from his silent domain. It is perhaps even more uncommon to see two pairs of eagles in the same tract of mountain than two families of lions in the same part of the forest. They separate from each other at such wide intervals as to afford ample range for subsistence, and esteem the value and extent of their domain to consist in the abundance of prey with which it is replenished. The eyes of the eagle have the glare of those of the lion, and are nearly of the same color. The claws are of the same shape. The organs of sound are equally powerful, and the cry equally terrible. Destined, both of them, for war and plunder, they are alike bold, fierce, and untractable. It is impossible to tame them unless they be caught in their infancy. End quote. It may be allowed that this parallel holds good in all its points but one, that which respects the voice of the eagle, which is a piercing treble, possessed of no grandeur, while that of the lion is a deep and dreadful bass. Of all his tribe, the golden eagle is the largest and most majestic. He measures 3 feet in length, 7 feet and a half from tip to tip of the wings, and weighs 14 pounds. The head and neck are clothed with narrow pointed feathers of a deep brown color, bordered with tawny. The whole body also is of a dark brown, the back being finely clouded with a deeper shade of the same. The tail is brown, irregularly barred with an obscure ash color. The beak is of a deep blue, and the eye of a hazel color. The legs are yellow, strong, and feathered to the very feet, and the toes are armed with formidable claws. The osprey, or fishing eagle. This bird is nearly as large as the golden eagle, measuring in length 3 feet and a half, but its expanded wings do not reach above 7 feet. Its bill is large, much hooked, and of a bluish color. Irises and some light hazel, and others yellow. A row of strong, bristly feathers hangs down from its underbill next to its throat, whence it has been termed the bearded eagle. The top of the head and back part of the neck are dark brown, inclining to black. The feathers on the back are variegated by a lighter brown with dark edges. The scapulars are pale brown, the edges nearly white. The breast and belly whitish, with irregular spots of brown. The tail feathers are dark brown, the outer edges of the exterior feathers whitish. The quill feathers and thighs are dusky, the legs and feet yellow, the claws, which are large and black, form a complete semicircle. It is found in various parts of Europe and America. It is, however, wide dispersed and was met with at Botany Island by Captain Cook. It lives chiefly on fish. Its usual haunts are by the seashore. It also frequents the borders of large lakes or rivers and is said to see so distinctly in the dark as to be able to pursue and catch its prey during the night. The nest is built on the ground among reeds, and the female lays 3 or 4 white eggs, which are rather smaller than a hen's. Frequent contests take place between the bald eagle and the osprey, the former endeavoring to deprive the latter of the prey which it has caught. The secretary falcon. This curious bird resembles the common falcon in its head, bill, and claws, but its legs are so long that when it stands upright it is not much unlike the crane. When standing erect it measures about 3 feet from the top of the head to the ground. It is a native of the interior of Africa, Asia, and the Philippine Islands. The general color of the plumage is a bluish ash, the tips of the wings and the thighs inclining to black. On the back of the head are several long, dark-colored feathers hanging down behind and capable of being erected at pleasure. This crest induced the Dutch colonists at the Cape to give it the name of the secretary. The Hottentots, however, style it the serpent-eater, from the avidity with which it catches and devours those noxious reptiles. The manner in which it seizes them displays great intelligence. On approaching them, it carries forward the point of one of its wings in order to parry their venomous bites, and waits till it finds an opportunity of spurning or treading on its adversary, or taking him on his pinions and throwing him into the air. When he has at last thus wearied him out, he kills and devours him at his leisure. Monsieur le Valiant witnessed one of these combats. Finding itself inferior in strength, the serpent endeavored to regain his hold, but the falcon, by a single leap, got before him and cut off his retreat. On whatever side the reptile strove to escape, the enemy still faced him. The serpent then erected himself to intimidate the bird, and, hissing dreadfully, displayed his menacing throat, inflamed eyes, and a head swollen with rage and venom. Sometimes this produced a momentary suspension of hostilities, but the bird soon returned to the charge, and covering her body with one of her wings as a buckler, struck her enemy with the bony protuberance of the other. The serpent at last dropped, and the bird laid open his skull with one stroke of her beak. This singular bird may easily be tamed, and it becomes very domestic and familiar. If severely pinched with hunger, it will then devour ducklings and chickens. Yet, if well fed, it will live with the poultry on amicable terms, and when it sees any of them quarreling, will run to part the combatants. Unlike all the rest of the feathered race, these birds always strike forward with their legs when they fight. The kite. Of the falcon tribe, the kite is the best known and the most ignoble. He may be distinguished from others of the same class by his forked tail and the slow circular eddies which he describes in the air previous to pouncing on his prey. He appears indeed to rest himself upon the air without making the smallest effort in flying. As, however, almost every bird of flight is able to elude his pursuit, he subsists only on accidental carnage, and may be considered as an insidious thief, who, on finding a small bird wounded, or a young chicken strayed from its mother, improves the moment of calamity to his own advantage. Sometimes, indeed, his hunger urges him to acts of desperation. One has been seen to fly round and round for a while to mark a clutch of chickens, and then suddenly dart upon the unresisting little animal and carry it off, the parent hen in vain crying out, and the boys hooting and casting stones to scare it from its plunder. This bird is common in England, where it continues the whole year. It is found in various parts of Europe, in very northern latitudes, whence it retires towards Egypt before winter in great numbers. In size, the kite is larger than the common buzzard. He has large eyes, yellow legs and feet, and black talons. The head and back are of a pale ash hue. His neck is reddish, and the lesser rows of the wing feathers are parti-colored, black, red, and white. The Moor-Buzzard. This bird is about 21 inches in length, with a black bill and yellow eyes. The whole crown of the head is of a yellowish white, lightly tinged with brown. The throat is of a light rust color. The rest of the plumage is of a reddish brown, with pale edges. The greater wing coverts are tipped with white. The legs are yellow and claws black. Rabbits, young wild ducks, and other waterfowl are the prey of this bird. It will likewise feed on fish, frogs, reptiles, and even insects. Its haunts are in hedges and bushes, near pools, marshes, and rivers that abound with fish. It builds its nest a little above the surface of the ground, or in hillocks covered with thick herbage. Though smaller, it is more active and bold than the common buzzard, and when pursued it faces its antagonist and makes a vigorous defense. End of Section 2, read by Elsie Selwyn. Section 3 of The Birds of the Air by John Frost. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Sparrowhawk, Owl, Peacock, Guinea Fowl, and Bustard. The Sparrowhawk. This bird is somewhat larger than a common pigeon, the male being about 12 inches in length and the female 15. It has a short, hooked, blue bill, slender reddish legs, and rather a long tail. The color of the eye is a bright orange. The plumage on the wings and upper parts of the body is brown, spotted with a yellowish dun. The lower parts in some are whitish and others of a russet color. The head is flat at the top, and above each eye is a strong and bony projection. A few scattered spots of white form a faint line running backwards towards the neck. The top of the head and all the upper parts of the body are of a dusky brown color. On the back part of the head there is a faint line of white. The greater quill feathers and the tail are dusky, with 4 bars of a darker hue on each. The inner edges of all the quills are marked with 2 or more large white spots. The tips of the tail feathers are white. The breast, belly, and under coverts of the wings and thighs are white, beautifully barred with brown. The throat is faintly streaked with brown. The legs and feet are yellow, claws black. The sparrowhawk is very numerous in various parts of the world, from Russia to the Cape of Good Hope. The female builds in high rocks, lofty ruins, or hollow trees, but will sometimes condescend to take up with the old nest of a crow. The owl. Owls may be divided into 2 classes, namely those with and those without tufts of feathers growing up from the head, like ears or horns. In the former class, the great horned owl is most conspicuous. It is the largest of the genus, being nearly equal in size to an eagle. It builds in rocks or mountains, and feeds on young hares, rabbits, and even pheasants and grouse. The long-eared owl is about 14 inches in length. Its plumage is marked with various shades of brown, yellow, and cream color. The legs and feet are covered with feathers. It inhabits ruined buildings and hollow trees. The short-eared owl is nearly of the same size as the bird we have just noticed. Its horns never consist of more than 3 feathers, while those of the long-eared owl are composed of 6. The short-eared owl flies by day. The white owl, barn owl, or screech owl, and the brown ivy owl are very common birds. The white owl inhabits barns, outhouses, etc. Its food generally consists of mice. The brown owl frequents woods and builds in hollows of trees. It feeds on mice, moles, etc. Some of this genus are remarkable for the smallness of their size. There is a Siberian species which barely exceeds a sparrow in bulk, and another, the little owl, which is not much larger than the thrush, and sees better by day than night. It preys on small birds, mice, etc. The greater part of owls are nocturnal birds, although some species prey during the daytime, and these, it has been observed, bear a stronger resemblance to the hawks than the rest of the genus. The peacock. To describe in adequate terms the dazzling beauties of this elegant bird would be a task of no small difficulty. Its head is adorned with a tuft consisting of 24 feathers, whose slender shafts are furnished with webs only at the ends, painted with the most exquisite green mixed with gold. The head, throat, neck, and breast are of a deep blue, glossed with green and gold. The greater coverts and bastard wings are reddish-brown, as are also the quills, some of which are variegated with black and green. The under part of the body is black with a greenish hue, but the distinguishing character of this singular bird is its train, which rises just above the tail and when erected forms a fan of the most resplendent hues. The two middle feathers are sometimes 4 feet and a half long, the others gradually diminishing on each side. The shafts white, and furnished from their origin nearly to the end, with parted filaments of varying colors ending in a flat vein, which is decorated with what is called the eye. The real tail consists of short, stiff brown feathers which serve as a support to the train. When pleased or delighted, and in sight of his females, the peacock erects his train and displays all the majesty of his beauty. All his movements are full of dignity. His head and neck bend nobly back. His pace is slow and solemn, and he frequently turns slowly and gracefully round as if to catch the sunbeams in every direction, and produce new colors of inconceivable richness and beauty, accompanied at the same time with a hollow murmuring voice expressive of desire. The cry of the peacock at other times is often repeated and very disagreeable. The plumes are shed every year, and while molting them, the bird, as if humiliated, retires from view. The peahen is somewhat less than the male, and though furnished both with a train and crest, is destitute of those dazzling beauties which distinguish her consort. The pintado, or guinea fowl. This bird is originally a native of Africa, but has been long naturalized in this country and is considered as a delicacy. It is about the size of a common hen, but being supported on longer legs, it looks much larger. Its head is covered with a kind of helmet, the back is round, and the tail turned downward, like that of a partridge. The whole plumage is black or dark gray, diversified with white spots, and the wattles, proceeding from the upper chap, give it a very peculiar aspect. All their habits resemble those of the poultry kind, and they agree in every other respect except that the sex can only be distinguished by the color of the wattles, those of the male being of a bluish cast, while in the female they are more inclining to red. The voice of the guinea fowl is extremely harsh and discordant. The eggs are smaller than those of the domestic hen, but have a harder shell. The bustard. Of the bustard tribe there are about 12 species, most of which are inhabitants of Europe. They have bills somewhat convex, long legs, naked above the knees, and only 3 toes, all of which are placed forward. The great bustard is a native of England, and is the largest of the land fowls of that country, the male sometimes weighing upwards of 25 pounds. The male of this variety differs in one remarkable respect from the female, which is in being furnished with a pouch in the forepart of the neck, capable of containing about 2 quarts of water. This water the animal can eject with such violence as not unfrequently to baffle the attacks of birds of prey. The bustard is nearly 4 feet in length and 9 in breadth. Its neck is a foot long and its legs 18 inches. The head and neck of the male are ash-colored. The back is barred transversely with bright rust color and black. The belly is white, and the tail, which consists of 20 feathers, is barred with red and black. The female is little more than half as large as the male, and her colors are less bright. The top of her head is of a deep orange, and the remaining part is brown. She also varies from the male in not having a tuft on either side of the head. End of section 3, read by Elsie Selwyn. Section 4 of The Birds of the Air by John Frost. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The wood-grouse, black grouse, partridge, wood pigeon, and carrier pigeon. The wood-grouse, or cock of the wood. This bird, which is nearly the size of a turkey, often weighs 12 or 14 pounds, but the female is considerably smaller. The head and neck are ash-colored and crossed with black lines. The body and wings of a chestnut brown, and the breast is of a blackish glossy green. The female differs very much in her plumage. This bird is chiefly found in mountainous and wooded situations, though in summer he occasionally ventures from his retreats to make short depredations on the cornfields. While living in the recesses of the forest, he attaches himself principally to the oak and the pine tree, the cones of the latter serving him for food, and the branches affording him a habitation. He also feeds upon cranberries, ants, eggs, and insects. And his gizzard, like that of domestic fowls, contains a quantity of gravel, which is supposed to assist his powers of digestion. The wood-grouse begins early to feel the genial influence of spring, and its courtship may be said to continue till the trees are entirely clothed with foliage and the forest is in full verdure. And as he now seems entirely deaf and insensible of danger, this is the time that sportsmen generally take to shoot him. Upon all other occasions he is the most timid and vigilant of birds. The black grouse. The black grouse is about 1 foot 10 inches in length and weighs nearly 4 pounds. The general color of the plumage is a rich black. Above each eye there is a dash of scarlet, and below the eye a spot of white. The neck and rump are of a glossy blue. The undertail coverts white. The lesser wing coverts brown, and the greater ones white. The wing is also barred with white. The feathers of the tail, when spread out, form a very singular curve on each side. The toes are toothed on the edges. The eyes are a deep blue and the bill black. These birds are common in cold countries. They frequent the northern parts of Scotland and feed on berries during the winter, and in summer on corn. They do not pair but assemble in flocks. The hen makes a careless nest on the ground and lays from 5 to 8 yellowish eggs freckled with brown. The partridge. This bird is about 13 inches in length. The general color of its plumage is brown and ash, elegantly mixed with black. Each feather is streaked down the middle with buff color. The sides of the head are tawny, the eyes are hazel, and under each eye there is a small saffron-colored spot. Between the eye and the ear is a naked skin of a bright scarlet, which is not very conspicuous in old birds. On the breast is a crescent of a deep chestnut color. The tail is short, the legs are of a greenish-white, and are furnished with a small knob behind. The bill is of a light brown. The female has no crescent on the breast, and her colors in general are not so distinct and bright as those of the male. Partridges are found principally in temperate climates, the extremes of heat and cold being unfavorable to them. Yet they exist in Greenland, where in winter their plumage becomes white, and they acquire a thick and warm down. In Sweden they burrow under the snow to shelter themselves from the cold. They are nowhere in greater plenty than in England, where in their season they contribute to the gratification of the epicure, their flesh being delicious. The wood pigeon. All the numerous and beautiful varieties of this tribe derive their origin from the stock dove, or wood pigeon, which is of a deep bluish ash color, the breast dashed with a fine changeable green and purple, the wings marked with 2 black bars, the back white, and the tail barred near the end with black. Such are the colors of the pigeon in its natural state, and from these simple tints the effects of domestication have produced a variety that words cannot describe, nor even fancy suggest. The stock dove usually builds in holes of rocks, or in excavated trees. Its murmuring note at morning and dusk is highly pleasing. The carrier pigeon. The carrier pigeon is distinguished from all others by a broad circle of naked white skin which surrounds the eyes, and by the color of the plumage, which is of a dark blue inclining to black. From their attachment to their native place, these birds are employed in several countries as the most expeditious carriers of letters, and formerly they were commonly used in conveying letters from place to place in time of war, and in case of sieges, when all other means of communication were intercepted or cut off by the enemy. These birds have been known to fly at the rate of 72 miles in the space of 2 hours and a half. One of them will carry a letter from Babylon to Aleppo in 48 hours, though the journey generally occupies a man for 30 days. End of Section 4, read by Elsie Selwyn. Section 5 of The Birds of the Air by John Frost. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The great crowned pigeon, parrot, macaw, hoopoe, and bird of paradise. Great crowned pigeon. There are several minor varieties of pigeons, which it is neither necessary nor suitable to our limits to notice. We cannot, however, close our sketch of this beautiful order without mentioning the most magnificent bird which it comprises, the Columba coronata of Linnaeus, or great crowned pigeon. In size it is nearly equal to the turkey. The greater part of its plumage is of a fine purple or bluish ash color. The middle of the back and the coverts of the wings are of a dark reddish brick color. These together, says Edwards, form a kind of saddle across the upper part of the bird. Some of the first row of covert feathers above the quills are white with red tips. The remainder of the row is ash-colored. The eye is of a beautiful red and placed in the center of a broad space of black, which passes backward from the upper mandible and ends in a point near the hinder part of the head. The head is adorned with a remarkably handsome crest of a pale blue or ash color, similar to that of the lightest parts of the common pigeon, and composed of a number of fine feathers with slender shafts and fine webs, which are usually elevated. The bill is black, and the end of the upper mandible overhangs the point of the lower. The legs and feet are of a whitish color, spotted with red. This splendid bird is a native of the East India Islands. It coos and has the peculiar actions and manners of other pigeons. The parrot. The parrot, of which there are many species, is said to have been first introduced into Europe by Alexander the Great. Of foreign birds, it is the one with which we are best acquainted, and is likewise one of the most beautiful of the feathered race, its plumage being exceedingly varied and of the most vivid hues. But its chief attraction is to be found in its ability to utter articulate sounds, a gift which it possesses in far greater perfection than any other bird. Its voice also is more like a man's than any other. Its note is of the true pitch and capable of a variety of modulations. For this it is indebted to the form of its bill, tongue, and head. In addition to the talent of speech, the parrot is endowed with a strong memory, and with more sagacity than is the lot of most other birds. In their native woods, these birds live together in flocks and generally breed in hollow trees, where they make a round hole for the accommodation of their young, but do not take the trouble of lining it within. The female lays 2 or 3 eggs about the size of those of a pigeon and marked with little specks. The natives are very assiduous in seeking out their nests and usually take them by cutting down the tree. By this means, indeed, the young parrots are liable to be killed, but if one of them survive, it is considered as a sufficient recompense. The old ones are shot with heavy arrows headed with cotton, which knock them down without killing them. The facility with which the parrot is taught to speak, and the great number of sentences it is capable of repeating are equally surprising. But its agreeable qualities are counterbalanced by the mischievous inclination it has to gnaw whatever it can reach. The food commonly given to these birds consists of hemp seed, nuts, fruits of every kind, and bread soaked in wine. They would prefer meat, but that kind of aliment has been found to make them dull and heavy, and to cause their feathers to drop off after some time. It has been observed that they keep their food in a kind of pouch, from which they afterwards throw it up in the same manner as ruminating animals. The macaw. In this genus are found the gorgeous macaws, the largest of the parrot kind, which for splendor of plumage may claim precedence of nearly all the feathered tribe. One of the finest of the group is the blue and yellow macaw. The upper parts of its body are of a most exquisite glossy and sparkling azure. The under parts are of a rich and vivid yellow. The cheeks are marked with 3 lines of small black feathers on a white ground and tinted with flesh color. The throat is ornamented with a fine stripe or collar of a greenish black, and the feathers on the head are of a green hue, partaking in a considerable degree of yellow. The great green macaw and the deep blue macaw are scarcely less beautiful, and even some common parrots, though inferior to the magnificent macaws in size, are certainly not so in splendor of plumage. Some very beautiful specimens of the blue and yellow macaw are to be seen in the Philadelphia Museum. The hoopoe. The length of this bird is 12 inches and the breadth 19. The bill is about 2 inches long, black, slender, and somewhat curved. The tongue very short and triangular, the eyes are hazel. The head is ornamented with a crest, consisting of a double row of feathers of a pale orange color, tipped with black, the highest about 2 inches in length. This, which reaches from the bill to the top of the neck, the animal can raise or let fall at pleasure. The neck is of a pale reddish brown, the under part of the body is white, and in the young ones, marked with dusky lines pointing downwards. The back, scapular, and wings are crossed with broad bars of black and white. the lesser coverts of the wings light brown. The tail consists of 10 feathers, each marked with white, which, when closed, assume the form of a crescent, the horns pointing downwards. The legs are short and black. The bird of paradise. The name of this beautiful creature, we may fairly suppose, was given to him on account of his being generally seen on the wing and flying in the tropic zone at a small distance from the land. Its appearance, being most welcome to the tired sailor and longing passenger, generally causes much happiness by its foretelling the vicinity of terra firma. The head is small, but adorned with colors which can vie with the brightest hues of the peacock's embellishments. The neck is of a fawn tint and the body very small, but covered with long feathers of a browner hue, tinged with gold. 2 feathers issue from the rump and constitute the tail. These volatiles, whose beauty exceeds that of all others, are natives of the Molucca Islands, and are frequently seen in large flocks among the delightful and spicy woods of that country. The greater bird of paradise, of which there are 2 varieties, breeds in New Guinea, and lives there during the wet monsoon, but during the dry monsoon it inhabits the islands of Aru, about 140 miles eastward. They migrate in flocks of 30 or 40, and have a leader which the Indians call the king. He is described as being black with red spots, and as soaring far above the flock, which never quit him, but always settle where he does. End of Section 5, read by Elsie Selwyn. Section 6 of The Birds of the Air by John Frost. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The toucan, great auk, swan, swan goose, and crowned crane. The toucan. This curious bird is almost 20 inches in length. The bill is 6 inches long and nearly 2 inches thick at the base, being of a yellowish green color, reddish at the tip. The nostrils are at the base of the bill. The principal upper parts of the body and the breast and neck are of a glossy black with a tinge of green. The lower part of the back, upper part of the tail, and small feathers of the wings are the same, with a cast of ash color. The breast is of a fine orange. The upper part of the body, the sides, thighs, and short feathers of the tail are a bright red. The remainder of the tail is of a greenish black, tipped with red. The legs and claws are black. This bird is easily tamed and will become very familiar and eat almost anything offered to it. In general, it feeds on fruits. In its wild state, it is a noisy bird and is perpetually moving from place to place, in quest of food, going northward or southward as the fruits ripen. It is very fond of grapes. The toucan builds its nests in the holes of trees that are either formed by itself or that from accident it meets with, and no bird better secures its young from external injury. It has not only birds, men, and serpents to guard against, but a numerous train of monkeys, still more prying, mischievous, and hungry than all the rest. The toucan, however, sits in its hole, defending the entrance with its great beak, and if the monkey venture to offer a visit of curiosity, the toucan gives him such a welcome that he is soon glad to make his escape. This bird is a native of Guyana and Brazil, and is said to be in great request in South America, both from the delicacy of its flesh and on account of the beauty of its plumage, particularly the feathers of the breast. The skin of this part the Indians pluck off, and when dry, glue to their cheeks, and this they consider as an irresistible addition to their beauty. These birds, when in flocks, on retiring to rest, generally appoint one to watch during the night. While they are asleep, he sits perched at the top of a tree above them, and makes a continual noise resembling ill-articulated sounds, moving also his head during the whole time to the right and left. For this reason the South Americans give to the toucan the name of preacher toucan. The cut below gives an idea of the odd positions the toucan assumes when asleep. The great auk. This bird is the size of a goose. Its bill is black and covered at the base with short velvet-like feathers. The upper parts of the plumage are black, and the lower parts white, with a spot of white between the bill and the eyes, and an oblong stripe of the same on the wings, which are too short for flight. It is a very bad walker, but swims and dives well. It is, however, observed by seamen that it is never seen out of soundings, so that its appearance serves as an infallible direction to land. It is frequently seen on the coasts of Norway, Greenland, Newfoundland, etc. There is another bird of this description called the penguin, of which there are several varieties, which seems to hold the same place in the southern parts of the world that the auks do in the northern, being only found in the temperate and frigid zones of the southern hemisphere. It resembles the former in almost all its habits, walking erect and being very stupid. It also resembles it in color, shortness of wings, rapidity of swimming, mode of feeding, and of making its nest. These birds hatch their young in an erect position, and cackle like geese, but in a hoarser tone. The most remarkable kind is the crested penguin, which inhabits several of the South Sea islands, and which is sometimes called the hopping penguin or jumping jack, from the circumstance of its leaping quite out of the water, sometimes to the height of 3 or 4 feet, when it meets an obstacle in its course. The swan. So much difference is there between this bird when on land and in the water, that it is hardly to be supposed the same, for in the latter no bird can possibly exceed it for beauty and majestic appearance. When it ascends from its favorite element, its motions are awkward, and its neck is stretched forward with an air of stupidity. It has indeed the appearance of being only a larger sort of goose, but when seen smoothly gliding along the water, displaying 1,000 graceful attitudes, and moving at pleasure without the smallest apparent effort, there is not a more beautiful figure in all nature. In its form we find no broken or harsh lines, in its motions nothing constrained or abrupt, but the roundest contours and the easiest transitions. The eye wanders over the whole with unalloyed pleasure, and with each change of position, every part assumes a new grace. It will swim faster than a man can walk. This bird has long been rendered domestic, and it is now a doubt whether there be any of the tame kind in a state of nature. The color of the tame swan is entirely white, and it generally weighs full 20 pounds. Under the feathers is a very thick, soft down, which is made an article of commerce for purposes of both use and ornament. The windpipe sinks down into the lungs in the ordinary manner, and it is the most silent of all the feathered tribes. It can do nothing more than hiss, which it does on receiving any provocation. In these respects it is very different from the wild or whistling swan. Guinea or swan goose. Of the goose tribes we shall select for description only the barnacle goose and the guinea or swan goose. Various fabulous accounts are given of the barnacle goose. Some authors have asserted that the birds are produced from shells which grow on the bottoms of ships that have long been at sea, and on the wood that has remained for a considerable time in the water. Others have stated very gravely that the barnacle goose grew on trees, that the fruit fell into the water when ripe and became living birds. Barnacle geese are found in the temperate regions in hard winters, but they depart with numbers of other waterfowl at the approach of spring to breed in more northern latitudes. The guinea or swan goose is remarkable for the proud and erect carriage of its body. It has a knob of considerable size on the base of its upper mandible, and generally speaking, a loose, bare pouch under its throat. It is supposed that the swan geese were originally brought from Guinea. They are now scattered over various parts of the world and kept by the curious with other domestic waterfowl, which they very much resemble in their habits. The plumage of the swan goose varies, like that of all other tame fowls, but the general color of the feathers is brownish, with light edges of a fainter hue on the underparts than on the back and wings. The crowned crane. Among the various species of cranes, the crowned crane, which is about the size of the common crane, is conspicuous. Its head is ornamented with a fine crest, composed of a sort of feathers, each of which is barbed or bristled in a singular manner throughout its whole extent. The plumage of this crane is of a dark greenish gray. It is a native of Africa and the Cape de Verde Islands. Cranes are migratory, and in winter quit the northern parts of the world for more southern and warmer countries. They are very easily tamed and have been known to attain a great age in a domesticated state. A singular instance of the attachment of a brown crane to its companion has been recorded by the talented Mrs. Bowditch. One of a pair, which were kept by a gentleman in England, having died, the other was apparently so affected by the loss of its fellow prisoner that but little hope was entertained of its surviving. At length, and as a forlorn hope, a large looking-glass was placed in the aviary. The bird no sooner beheld the reflection of his own image than, probably conceiving it to be his companion, He smoothed his ruffled plumes, assumed an air of joy, regained his strength, and lived some years after, perfectly contented and passing much of his time before the glass. Bartram gives a singular account of the manner in which the savannah cranes make their nests. They collect a quantity of dry grass on a little hillock, which is nearly as high as their bodies, and in incubating they stand with one leg on each side of the hillock, so that the breast only touches the eggs. End of Section 6, read by Elsie Selwyn. Section 7 of The Birds of the Air by John Frost. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Bittern, Heron, Adjutant, Spoonbill, and Ruff. The Bittern. The bittern is stouter than the common heron, but not quite so large as that bird. The greater part of its plumage is marked with a multitude of small streaks and specks of black on a rust-colored ground. The beak is very strong at the base and tapers gradually to a very sharp point. The mandibles open behind the eyes. The top of the head is covered with a kind of crest of long feathers, which the bird can raise at will. The legs are of a palish green color. The claws are long and sharp, and the middle ones serrated. Bitterns, in the manner of taking their food and in their general habits, very much resemble the common heron, but they are by no means deficient in courage. When attacked by a bird of prey, the bittern bravely defends itself, and frequently repulses its assailant, and if wounded, so as to be incapable of flying, it will not scruple to attack the sportsman, and often inflicts rather severe wounds with its keen and powerful bill. The bittern usually constructs its nest of rushes and withered water plants, among the sedges which clothe the banks of pools. It is said that the hen feeds the young ones for 3 days in the nest, and then leads them forth in quest of food. The bittern is remarkable for uttering a very peculiar, coarse, hollow note at certain times, which may be heard at a great distance. The heron. The common heron measures about 3 feet in length and rarely weighs more than as many pounds. Although rapacious in the extreme, it is cowardly in its disposition. It will fly from the sparrowhawk, and in those days when falconry was one of the principal diversions of the great in England, the heron was ranked among the royal game. A penalty of 20 shillings, an important fine in those times, was attached to the offense of destroying its eggs. For hours together this bird will stand motionless in the water, watching its prey and appearing more like the stump of a tree than a living creature. It will traverse immense distances in quest of waters in which its food abounds, and soar so high in its flights as scarcely to be visible to the naked eye. Its plumage is principally white, black, gray, and ashy. The nests of these birds are often built on the tops of high trees. The Adjutant. This bird is of the heron tribe, and according to the Linnaean system, belongs to the order of waders. In its appearance there is something singular. Under the chin is a kind of purse, or bag, which seems adapted to receive the water that they swallow with their food. This connects it in some degree with the pelican. There is neither hair, feather, nor down on the head, which looks as if it were made of wood, and this oddity is heightened by the eye seeming to be set in it, as if without lids or any cartilaginous appendages. The beak is equally anomalous. It is composed of 2 long sticks, having the appearance of wood, with which the bird makes a loud chattering noise when cleaning them. The covert of the wings and back is black, with a bluish tint. The under part of the body is whitish. The legs and thighs are long, unfeathered, and of a grayish hue. The neck also is devoid of feathers. The Spoonbill. Of the spoonbill, which has sometimes erroneously been called the shoveler, the real shoveler being a bird of the duck tribe, there are 3 species. The first of these is the roseate spoonbill, which has beautiful red plumage, with a collar of black at the lower part of the neck. The second is called the dwarf spoonbill and is about the size of a sparrow. Its body is brown above and white beneath. The most common species, however, is that which bears the name of the white spoonbill, from its plumage, except in some rare instances, being entirely white. This bird is about the size of a heron, but somewhat shorter in the neck and legs. The bill is more than 1/2 foot in length and has the shape of a spoon. Their food is fish, which they often take from other birds, in the manner of the bald eagle, also mussels and other shellfish. and they will also destroy frogs and snakes. The ruff. The ruff is about a foot in length with a bill of about an inch. The face is covered with yellow pimples, and the back part of the head and neck are furnished with long feathers, standing out somewhat like the ruff worn by our ancestors. A few of these feathers stand up over each eye and appear not unlike ears. The colors of the ruffs are in no two birds alike. In general, they are brownish and barred with black, though some have been seen that were altogether white. The female, which is called the reeve, is smaller than the male, of a brown color and destitute of the ruff on the neck. The ruffs are much more numerous than the reeves, and they have many severe contentions for their mates. The male chooses a stand on some dry bank near a splash of water, round which he runs so often as to make a bare circular path. The moment a female comes in sight, all the males within a certain distance commence a general battle, placing their bills to the ground and spreading their ruff, and this opportunity is seized by the fowlers, who in the confusion catch them by means of nets in great number. Yet even in their captivity their animosity still continues. When kept in a room, each bird takes its stand as in the open air, and if another intrudes on this chosen domain, a conflict ensues. If the pan from which they feed be not large enough to allow of their not touching each other, they instantly commence a contest. End of section 7, read by Elsie Selwyn. End of The Birds of the Air by John Frost.